Hello everyone. Just recently I've got interested again in World War I aerial wargaming, and the obvious kind of avenue into that is the Wings of Glory game. Massive franchise now. It's kind of it dominates really the genre, and there isn't very little outside of it, to choose from. But I wanted to kind of try and break free, really, of that, that sort of monopoly, really, that they have. Find some alternatives, and about 2 years ago, on Dougie's Wargaming blog show channel, he interviewed the author, John Blankley, who's local to his club up in the northeast. He interviewed the author of this set of rules, Always Above. So I purchased them about 2 years ago. Wasn't really that impressed with them, to be honest, but thought I would give them a proper go now. Just to see if I could make something of them. I've kind of I'm not going to turn this video into too much of a kind of criticism of these rules. That's not what I want to do. What I really want to do is talk about the difficulties of writing rules, really, and the difficulties of breaking into a sort of market that is already so heavily dominated by another set of rules. Don't take this video as I'm just using it to have a knock at these sort of rules. I've played a few games. It's not bad. It's just not for me, and I want to explain why a little bit. So originally, when I got 2 years ago, as I say, I thought I would invest in the rules, and sorry, I've forgotten where you get them from. It's a particular shop or website. I don't think you can get them through. Certainly can't get them through War Games Vault. You can't get them through Amazon or anything like that. But it's a kind of wargaming hobby website or shop that's selling them. So I originally purchased a copy, and you also have to purchase templates and so on. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in the middle. You can see some of them over in the corner here. This arrived, and it seemed a very thin volume to me, and it didn't seem to contain some of the content that the description had referred to. So that kind of, didn't put me off, but what didn't kind of add to my keenness to get on with these set of rules, put it that way. But obviously there'd been this had been a kind of an early test trial publication or something, because about 2 weeks later, without me having to complain or anything like that, I got another copy, a thicker one, that did have things like aircraft data, stuff like that. So there'd obviously been a mistake right at the beginning. They'd I don't know what they'd done, but basically that was an error. So this just got replaced by that, and by that stage I'd already kind of put the rules to one side to be explored later, and it's only now 2 years later that I have been making a serious effort to get a game out of them. Right, now, where to begin? So, um, it's like this with all rules, that, that just about every genre, every subject for a war game has been dealt with, and there are rules out there now. Um, so every time you want to write your own set of rules, it's like reinventing the wheel in a way, and you have to find some kind of unique selling point, I suppose, is the phrase. A new mechanism, a novel way, a novel approach, something like that. Um, it, this really isn't a novel approach to. It's got a lot of similarities with Wings of Glory. Let's put it that way. To begin with, he obviously recognises the sort of universal kind of aspect of Wings of Glory. So he suggests that you can play the game using the Wings of Glory models. So he's already sort of piggybacking on the back of Wings of Glory to an extent. You don't have to use the models, but you do have to play the game with the aircraft. These are all Ares Wings of Glory models, by the way, but you do have to play the game with the Litco sized bases that are the same as the Wings of Glory game. Excuse me. Now, that is because the templates that he uses to move the planes are that kind of size. So they basically, you put them in front of the model, and then you move your plane. Depending on the template, you move your plane accordingly. So you're beginning to get trapped. You're beginning to be obliged to go down a certain avenue. So as I say, I wanted to sort of try and break free of the manacles of the Wings of Glory game. So I thought, well, I can quite easily 3D print these planes now, and I've been having a lot of fun doing that. But you then have to find the bases, and the bases are no longer readily available. So if you want the Litco type bases, so here we go, let's put on the table a plane that I 3D printed. Try and zoom in on a little bit. And it's attached to the same size base that I purchased from Litco. Now, I got these, the Litco bases, from Litco themselves direct. When I went on the internet, the prices were all in pounds, in GBP. So I sort of rather stupidly just assumed that I was ordering the bases from a website in the UK. That wasn't the case at all. In fact, I was purchasing them from the US, and I realised that immediately when the postage, was through FedEx international posting. So I realised straight away what was happening, but I had to have the bases. I couldn't find, an alternative source in the UK. So I went ahead and made my purchase. So that's, you have to be aware that this game has to be played on that size of base, and the bases themselves are difficult to, acquire. Maybe you could get war bases or something like that to do them in MDF. It wouldn't look quite so aesthetically pleasing to have solid bases on a table for a game that is about objects flying above the table, but there is that choice. It didn't. It still it didn't prove that simple either, because when they dispatched my order, they gave me is it USPS, US Postal Service, yeah, USPS tracking number. I thought that was odd, because they're supposed to be sending them internationally via FedEx. So I thought, well, then the tracking number, when I did try and use it, I just kept getting this, ineligible reply. We can't find your, we can't find this dispatch, and refer back to the seller. So eventually, I thought, well, it doesn't look as though it's going to drop into the hands of FedEx at any point. So I got in touch with Litco and said I was a bit confused, and they replied straight away saying, yeah, you should be confused because we should have sent them through FedEx. So they sent me another order. They just reposted it via FedEx, and that had a tracking number, and that I was able to follow, and that went all around the houses really. So I thought maybe I'm going to get stung for some kind of customs duty as they arrive in England, but they actually flew them into Dublin. No, not Dublin. I can't remember the name of it, but it was it was the FedEx kind of depot in Ireland. So they had gone from the US into the EU. Maybe there was something with the the Brexit arrangement with the border in Northern Ireland, that it meant that they could transfer them across into the UK, so without having to pay, without them having customs check as they crossed into Northern Ireland. I don't know, but that didn't happen anyway, because they seemed to fly directly from Ireland into Stansted, I think it was, and then from there via various depots in the country, in the UK, to me. And no, they did go through some kind of customs check, but I didn't get charged anything. So it all ended up getting there in the end. Sorry, this is turning into a bit of a tangential story here, but it's worth sharing all the difficulties you get when you try and get involved in a new set of rules. So it arrived, and lo and behold, on the same day as they arrived, the other order arrived. So I got double my purchase. So I got two sets of stands and flight rods and so on, on the same day. So I got double my value. That other package, is just bizarre, because it came from Switzerland, and once again it went through customs check, but I didn't get charged anything. Maybe because it was below a certain value. But my understanding of the certainly the tariffs that have the Trump administration have imposed is that there's no lower limit to what you can be charged on. So very confusing. Took a while. Took about 3 weeks, I suppose, to get them. Not easy. And the other problem is that by the time they arrived, I'd already decided that I wasn't, probably going to get too heavily invested in always above rules, and I was going to look for something else. And I thought I would go for, as you probably know if you follow my channel, I'm a big fan of lacquered coffins for World War Two. And that chap, Tom Jensen, had previously written a set of rules called Dogfight for World War One, which is a very similar mechanism. So I thought, well, I should go for that really. This is a larger scale than Tom Jensen's rules normally involve. These aircraft are 144, where he tends to use or recommend, I think they're 1/600 scale tumbling dice models and that. But I was into printing them. I'm really pleased with the way these models have turned out and been printed. But the point is, I then wanted the models to be detachable from the flight stands, and the flight stands that you get, let's just zoom in out a little bit so you can see the flight stands that you get from Litco, the rods or the actual stand itself isn't the same as the Wings of Glory method. There's no peg on it. No, in Wings of Glory there's a peg on the plane and it fits into a hollow in the rod, and the rod itself is in 4 parts so that you can adjust the altitude. With the things you get from Litco, they're just solid. So I thought, well, I will stick magnets on the planes and magnets on the rods, and then I can take the planes off of those flying stands and put them onto something more suitable for the Dogfight rules by Tom Jensen, which is smaller hexagonal stands. So here's another couple of planes that are 3D printed, and they're attached by magnets to the hexagonal stands. So that again is kind of a bit of a compromise, because the magnets, the neodymium magnets, are so strong that there's almost as much chance that when you remove, say, that plane to put it on a stand like this, that the magnet itself is going to get pulled away either from the model or more probably from the tip of the flying stand. And I've had that happen. And if that happens, then you're stuck really. If you're playing a game, then you've got to faff around trying to glue it back on, so you need super glue, you might be a club, etc, etc. So I've given up on that idea as well. I've decided that I'm going to print all the I've still got some printed planes to paint, but in future when I print any further models, I'm actually going to use there's a tool that you can use to punch holes into models, so that if you've hollowed it out to save on resin, the resin that's within the model will drain out rather than stay in the model, because that causes all kinds of problems as it cures with the model cracking and so on. So I'm going to use that and punch kind of very small holes in the bases of the models, so that I can then insert the flying stands in them and glue the stands to the planes, and then they would have to be used exclusively for Dogfight rather than Always Above. So that's another reason why I'm giving up on Always Above, really, which has got nothing to do with the my impression of the rules. It's all down to the practicalities of what I'm going to how I'm going to proceed. I'll I should have put up as well. I'll overlay this video with a little sequence showing you how to punch those holes into the models. The reason you can't drill a hole in afterwards is that the resin, no matter how, you can get different qualities of resin, and some of them are a little bit more flexible than others, but you're going to damage the model. You know, the drill is going to burst it open. It's going to break as you try and drill. So the 3D resin isn't really a good medium through which to drill holes. So that isn't, you know, a viable kind of option. Right, now what I'll do now, I think, is just turn the camera off for a minute to rearrange the table and talk a little bit about the rules always above themselves. Okay, so as I say, you're always reinventing the wheel when you come up with a new set of wargames rules. And in the case of aerial wargaming, not just World War One, but any era really, there are two main methods of constructing the rules really. One is to use a template system, which is what Always Above does. So you have to have a set of templates in this game for every plane, which I think is a little bit excessive, but you can't. Well, I've been sharing the templates between planes, but you could do it that way. But in theory, what you're doing is secretly, each player is secretly selecting a choice of two templates. Yeah, sorry, I haven't prepared this very well in a way. Let's take some from over here. So you might choose those two templates to move your plane, but you have to keep it secret from the opposing player. You can't do that because you might be choosing that, which is obviously a turn, and it's obviously a turn to the right, because when you turn it over like that, it looks like it's turning to the left. So it's obvious, you know, to your opponent that you're, you know, what you're deciding to do. So you certainly can't share the templates with your opponent, because, you know, that would involve compromising on, or I need the turn right or turn left or whatever. So the way, so you know, so you have to have one set per player. So you're already there. I think there's about 14 different templates that you need to use for different manoeuvres and degrees of turn, and slipping to the left or the right, or weaving to the left or the right, that kind of thing. It's already beginning to get cumbersome, and also you need to keep it secret. So the way the author suggests you do that is that you can also purchase these control panels here, and this, I think, is you know, is an early stage design that somehow got through into the final product. But on the interview that he gave with Dougie, he's saying you choose two templates in secret, and you conceal them underneath the control panel so that your opponent doesn't know what you're going to do. So look at this control panel. You buy this along with two measurement sticks, 10 and 5 inch, which is for, it's not for moving, obviously, because you're using templates to move. This is just for ascertaining the range for your guns. But I really question the value of this. What is this for here? Is it to put these in? That doesn't fit, although it's clear. Oh, well, it does just about fit. Most of the templates don't fit. They're either too long or they're curved in some way. So you can't put them face down in that and then fish them out. You know, there's no point. There's no point in this. You know, I'm wondering whether it's, like I say, it was an early stage design, and at one time all the templates were going to be that shape. I don't know. This, as far as I can tell, is you have 12 rounds of ammunition effectively, and you count down as you expend them. So regardless of the type of plane, regardless of whether it has twin machine guns or single machine gun, every gun has 12, effectively 12 shots. You know, that clearly wasn't the case in, you know, not all guns are equal, and some planes had more guns than others. No, you know, no allowance for that in the rules. But look at these markers that you have. They have to go in that way because that's a sort of rectangular shape rather than square shape. So you have to put them in that way. If your pilot and your observer both have the same number of guns, you can't fit it in. Can you see that all right? Maybe zoom in a little bit. Yeah, they just don't stay side by side. So that's odd. And the only other thing on here is the combat modifiers. Now that's not permanent. That's something you have to tot up for each round of fire. You know, the range, whether you're pointing directly at the plane, whether it's your first, second or third shot. So you've got to do that every time, you know, and you can easily do it in your head. There's no point in having this. So in terms of this, the function of this, it's pointless. There's no need to have it. No need to fork out money. And the only other thing you get is the 5 and the 10-inch rulers. You know, that's easily dealt with a tape measure. So this is a total waste of money. Now, as I kind of inferred when I was talking about, you know, the number of machine guns that a plane has, as far as I can tell in this set of rules, there is very little indeed to distinguish between one plane type and another. You do have a list of the aircraft, typical aircraft of the Royal Flying Corps and aircraft of the Imperial German Air Force here. But there is very little. The things that you have to make an allowance for are its speed, the altitude that it can reach, and whether or not it has a rotary engine. Again, I'll come back to that a little bit later. They are the only three factors that you really need to take into account. So in other words, a plane from the very beginning of the war has almost as much chance against the later planes, you know, that came out in the 1918, then it's, an equivalent plane. So there is very little distinction between planes, very little indeed, and that to me is the most sort of damning criticism that I can come up with of these rules. You want far more distinction between different types of aircraft. Otherwise, if the Fokker Scourge, when the Fokker Eindecker was introduced with the sort of the synchronization of the machine gun with the spin of the propeller, all that kind of thing, it's increased maneuverability, and it just wouldn't happen in these rules, because those earlier planes that were shot down in their dozens by the Fokker Eindecker, would have just as much capability of shooting down the Fokker Eindecker. So, I find that very odd indeed. I can see how, the author's trying to go for a simple, fast play game, but you want more, you want more sophistication than that, I think. And while I'm on this page, let me just see if I can zoom in, keep it in focus. Under the British planes here, you've got the Sopwith Camel, the Sopwith Pup, the Sopwith Dolphin, and the Sopwith Tripe. What the hell is a Sopwith Tripe? There was a Sopwith Triplane, you'd expect to see that there, but there was also a Sopwith, what was it called? Snipe. Got one on the table here, I think. I've got a model, for... So Tripe is kind of like an amalgamation of Snipe and Tripe. Mad. It's just mad. Don't understand that at all. Sorry, I'm beginning to get kind of critical of these rules, and I'm trying not to be. I'm trying to talk about the difficulties of writing a set of rules, but that to me is another oddity. Yeah, now when you're choosing the templates, the tiles, it says here, if the aircraft you wish to fly has a top speed of 100 miles per hour, you can discard all other MPH tiles from your deck. Your deck will now include one straight, a left and right weave, Immelman, and a dive at your machine's 100 mile per hour speed. That means that you can't fly anything other than your top speed. You may not want to. You may want to fly at a lower speed than the maximum speed that you're allowed. But it says there quite specifically, discard all the other MPH tiles. Again, that is very odd. If you do it the other way, and you do include lower speeds, then you have even more tiles to choose from, even more templates. Gets even more cumbersome. So I think again he's done that for simplicity, but it's not, it's taking away from the realism. The flight system has a maximum altitude of 20,000 feet, which is expressed as a 10, each increment being 2,000 feet. So you have to put on the flight stand, which I'm perfectly happy with. You have to put a 10-sided dice to indicate the altitude of the plane at any one time. So that is 10,000 feet, 5. That makes sense, and I quite like that. I think altitude is a very important aspect of aerial war games, and some aerial war games deal with it quite crudely. Altitude is, a prime aspect of the games that I like to play. Right, now, while I'm on that subject, I'm going to come back to that page in a minute, but the modifiers that I was talking about earlier, you have to be flying at the same level as your target, or fighters may fire at aircraft at one height level below themselves. This must be at short range. Again, I think what he's got in mind here is that the title of the rules, always above, and he talks a little bit about how he interviewed pilots in who had survived veterans of the First World War during the early 1980s. Had the opportunity to talk to some of the last surviving aces who fought above the trenches, and much of those conversations have found their way into this rule set. How have they found their way in? Because certainly before the synchronization of the machine gun with the propeller, a lot of machine guns, if they were fired by the pilot, were set up so that you fired upwards above the spin of the propeller. Certainly not downwards. You couldn't see what was below the nose of the plane easily anyway. So it was very possible to fire at a plane that was above you in height, but certainly not below you. So I think he's kind of introduced this one level below short range, in order to maintain this sort of idea of having a height advantage. But height advantage gave an advantage to the pilots in the First World War, because they would go up to kind of very high low oxygen altitudes, and sit there waiting to spot an enemy and then dive steeply down on them. So they had the advantage of surprise and speed, but they certainly didn't have a height advantage in terms of gunnery. So that to me is unrealistic as well. And I'm going to come back to these modifiers again, but I wanted to, as I say, there was one other thing I wanted to talk about with the tiles. You have this tile here called a rotary engine turn tile, which is only available to planes that have rotary engines. Now this is a nice mechanism in a way, it's one of the aspects where you do have to distinguish between planes. So I like that. There should be more in here where different plane types, are distinguished from one another, and this is one case where they are. But the rotary engine turn, I was talking to a guy that visited the RAF museum in London recently. I was talking to a guy there, one of the staff. Rotary engines, if the engine spun clockwise, they would tend to pull the plane, it would yaw to the left, and that meant that it was possible for a rotary engine plane to turn very steeply to the left if the pilot wished the plane to do so. Otherwise, they were constantly having to turn the rudder to the right in order to maintain a straight line. So this is a nice aspect, but not all rotary engines did turn clockwise. Most did, but it depended on the I don't know what the correct word is, but the sort of pitch of the propeller blades. It's the propeller blade, the shape and configuration of the propeller blade could either meant it cut through the air by turning to the left or turning to the right, and the rotary engine would have to therefore accommodate itself to the pitch of the propeller. So that's what I'm saying, that in this, all rotary engine planes are deemed to be the same. The majority of them were that, but some weren't. I couldn't tell you a specific example, but some weren't. But other than that, that's quite a nice little aspect of the game, I think. The modifiers, however, are sort of, again, it sort of oversimplifies it. You can roll to see if your pilot is a natural crack shot, or your observer, even your gunner. If they are, then they get a +1 modifier, so you can kind of give a bit of character to your plane. Once they've had over 5 kills, then they get a bonus for being an ace. So that, again, that's a bit of personalisation if you've been playing a campaign or something like that. You get a bonus if it's short range, and again, there's that whole thing. You can fire at a plane below your level at short range. That's wrong. You get a bonus if you're at long range and tailing, or short range and tailing, and you get higher bonus at short range. They're all nice aspects. The tailing thing, though, I'll come back to in a minute. Now, in any one burst of fire, you can have a second and a third shot. And if you fire a second shot, you get +1 bonus. If you fire a third shot, you get a +2 bonus. You get a bonus for shooting at an airplane that has flown straight and level on that turn, and you get another bonus if the shooting base is pointing directly at the enemy base. This again goes back to that whole thing about piggybacking on Wings of Glory, because in Wings of Glory you can shoot at anything that's within that arc. I'm not keen on that set of, on that particular rule anyway. I think it's sort of unrealistic for that plane to be able to shoot at a plane that is over here. So I like to play it that it's pointing directly anyway. So that's my own, conception, and you can either use that rule or not. But I think, in general, I would say the plane should always be pointing directly at the enemy's base. Maybe if you had a machine gun, forward firing machine gun mounted above the wing on some kind of something that gives it a bit of trajectory, but again, it comes into that whole thing about, these rules sort of seem to encompass virtually every type of plane, no matter how the guns are configured, how many guns you have, so that goes back to that thing about, do you have twin or single machine gun? There's nothing in here to give you a better chance of hitting if you're firing a pair of machine guns than if you're firing a single machine gun. It complicates the rules, but I think most people want that in a World War One aerial combat game. They don't want everything to be just right down to the basics, because it makes it so difficult for, you know, the superiority of a late war, you know, more sophisticated, more developed aircraft to you know, to win over something that's just like a flying box kite, you know, from the early part of the war. But this thing about the bonus, the bonus for the second and third shot, this is all to do with incendiary bullets. If I can find a tracer ammunition, here we go. 1 in 3 bullets loaded into belts and drums to be fired from machine guns mounted in aircraft were filled with a small pyrotechnic charge which could be seen by the gunner as a phosphorescent glow and a smoke trail. This helped to guide the bullets to the target, and always above we apply a +1 modifier after each shot from a burst. Is that correct? I don't know, I'm no big expert, but I don't think every machine gun had tracer ammunition, did they? Was it something that came along later in the war? I might be wrong on that, I don't know, but that's in there for every aircraft. The tailing thing, the rules for tailing, however, I do like, apart from one aspect of it. It says tailing can be claimed if a line can be drawn from the centre of the attacking airplane's base through the attack plane's rear to front baseline. Okay, so this triplane here is tailing that Sopwith Camel. It's still tailing that Sopwith Camel, even though it's flying in the opposite direction. It's tailing the Sopwith Camel if it's flying like that. I don't think that's, I think that's probably badly worded. I think they probably intended it to be something like that. So I would play that rule that if you can draw a line from the centre of the tailing plane's base through the front edge of your own base and through the rear and front edge of the tailplane's base, I think I would. So it gives you a little bit of leeway. That's tailing and that's tailing, but that isn't tailing, and that certainly isn't tailing. I would play it that way. Now, as well as having the advantage in terms of shooting, giving you those bonuses for shooting, there's quite a nice little mechanism here in that what you do, it says the game is halted while the attacker picks 3 movement tiles. The attacked player may only choose 1 tile. Play can then be resumed. The attacked player plays his movement, followed by the attacking player playing any of his chosen movements. All other players may now play their sequenced movement tiles. I'm not entirely clear how that interruption of play, the consequence it has on the 2 tiles that this player may already have chosen. So the way I've been playing that rule is that what you do is you replace your chosen movement tiles with the tiles that you've picked in that fashion, and you don't interrupt the game, you simply alter it to substitute the tiles for that you might have chosen earlier for the tiles that you've chosen now, and it works really well. It's a nice fun it's a nice fun mechanism, rather than saying if the attack player can break away from the player, because it does. If you've got several planes on the table, a lot of other planes on the table, it does matter that you're giving those planes a sort of an additional move within the turn sequence. So I think it works better my way. But again, it's something. It's the same with any set of rules you're playing. You can always adjust them to play. If you're not happy with something, you can adjust it. So it's not a criticism of these rules. It's just something that I think works better a different way. Now, the actual hit tables, really good. Really enjoy the mechanisms. You fire, you roll to see if you've hit. So you roll on a 10, a 10-sided dice. The guns can stop, like the guns jamming on a 1. Otherwise, you hit various other parts. So 2 to 5 are either only going to hit the fabric, or if the plane's got an observer, they're going to hit the observer. So if you've got a single, pilot in the plane, single crew, you need to roll a 6 to a 10. 6 hits the fuel, 7 hits the spars, 8 hits the controls, 9 hits the engine, 10 hits the pilot. But then you have to see what damage you've done, and you roll a 10-sided dice again. Excuse me for keeping coughing. And you can have no effect. If you roll a 1 to 3, most of these are no effect. So they've made it a little bit more sophisticated with the pilot. So if you roll a 1, you hit his cigarette case, and a 2 and a 3 is a bullet graze. But then everything else, you're causing some kind of damage. Some of the damage is immediately catastrophic, like you might kill the pilot. Others, it might be the plane is out of control, or you can't turn right, whatever. So some have more serious consequences than others, and I really like all that. And there's various descriptions of how you deal with the various damages here. So for instance, an oil leak, after the second sequence movement, you roll a d10. 1 to 7 you carry on. 1 to 7 you carry on. 8 to 10 the engine seizes up, and you go into a glide and eventually come to the ground. That is the best to me. These are the best 3 pages of this set of rules. I might well end up trying to include this sort of mechanism in other games, but as I say, I'm not going to pursue these rules much further. But that's useful for useful mechanism to maybe include in further games. I should have said earlier, so let me say it now, that because I find all this, all these tiles way too cumbersome, it's much simpler to print something like this. So I've made my own little table here. You can see, you write the plane type down there, its maximum speed in miles per hour, its maximum altitude, and the role, that's just whether it's a fighter or reconnaissance or bomber or whatever. And then you keep track of the ammo here, so you just tick off a box as you use ammo. You've got all your choice of tiles here. So I tried to do that so you've got the left hand type maneuvers over here, the right hand type of maneuvers over here, and anything that's more or less going straight forward there. And then in bold print I put the kind of code that you use to write down here the 2 tiles that you want to pick. So I think that's much easier. It keeps it private, keeps it secret from your opponents. If you get something like a damage to your plane where you can't turn left or you can't turn right, then you can just draw a line through all that, so that you know your plane is kind of damaged in that respect. So it's, you know, it's visible to you, easy to remember. I don't think there are any. You'd cross that off straight away, rotary engine turn, if your plane had, you know, a sort of line, a configuration of the pistons or something like that. So you could cross that off straight away. If there's anything, you know, that your plane can't do, you can just run a line through it straight away. So I think that's a much simpler, certainly more cost effective way of playing this game if you do want to do it in that respect. Now the other, oh yeah, there are collisions as well. That's quite a nice, if the bases overlap, then there's a possibility of collisions, which is good. Won't go into all these other little sophistications, but you've got rules for rockets and incendiary bullets, and rules for taking photographs and bombing and shooting down observation balloons, all that kind of thing. The only other thing that I just wanted to talk about a little bit with these rules is, just as with Wings of Glory, it's not a very good game to play solo, and yet I have been playing it solo quite successfully. And how I've been doing that is, you probably wouldn't have seen it, but many years ago now I did put up a video on the subject of Wings of Glory, and I was talking about, there's a chap, forgive me, anyway, there's a Wings of Glory, I think it's called the Wings of Glory Aerodrome, where you can download some rules for solo play, and you can also purchase, or you can print it, you can download and print it, a sort of cutout here, template here, if you like to call it that, which you put round all the planes that are being played using kind of AI, I suppose you could call it, you know, pre-programmed. So you have sections here. This is I'm talking about Wings of Glory now. You have sections here. You look to see where the closest enemy plane is, and you pick the section, and then in Wings of Glory, let's see if I can find them. Wings of Glory, you have a sheet like this for each type of plane. So all the planes have got different categories, you know, so you have to pick the appropriate one, and you roll a 6-sided dice depending on the sector that it's in, and your dice roll, then you then choose those 3 particular cards for that particular plane. So I've kind of modified that for Always Above. So if you are into into Always Above and you want to play it solo, best I can do, really, I'm afraid, is just to allow you to pause the camera on this sheet that I composed, so that you can make your own. I think I've got all the boxes on there. So the way I've done it is, you have the sector numbers down here, you roll a 6-sided dice again, and then depending on your roll you pick those particular tiles. Now the difference between Wings of Glory, this system here, and my adapted system is that in here I think you have to play these in that order. In here, I'm giving you the option, of deciding which is the more appropriate tile to use. Because sometimes it's blatantly obvious that you would want to side slip right to begin with. For instance, it would line you up with an opponent rather than left. So you don't want to just mechanically move left and then right when you miss an opportunity. And you have, if you've got a rotary engine down here, then you have to make you can either make a 90-degree left or a rotary engine turn. But if you haven't got a rotary engine turn, then you're obliged to make the 90-degree left. And again, you don't have to do that. First, you could do that second. And you've also got here, whether you got a rotary engine or not, the other tile is you got a choice of making a 90-degree left or making a straight, a climb, or a dive. So it gives the kind of robotic plane a little bit more flexibility in what you do with it. It makes it a little bit more realistic, and it's not you're still putting yourself in the seat of the opponent's plane and playing it sensibly rather than playing it to your advantage. So this has worked really well, and I have had some quite fun games playing with this system. So the rules they're not bad. They're just too simplistic for me in terms of the sort of way virtually every plane has an equal chance in this game, that kind of thing. Certain things that I've modified that you don't have to, but the tiles, they're just too. It's too cumbersome. There's too much on the table for one thing. It's much better to have it all printed out and then just put the tiles on the table when you need to move the planes, and then all the players in the game can play. With the same set of tiles, so you haven't got to invest in lots and lots and lots of tiles, one per plane. But as I say, I just think there are too many hurdles to jump in terms of getting the Litco bases, all that kind of thing. It's just the magnets. Unless you're going to buy the Wings of Glory planes to use these rules, then you've got to print the planes yourself, or use a smaller scale plane, in which case the tiles are then too big. All that kind of thing. It means I'm not going to be pursuing this set of rules, other than using the models I've got maybe for the occasional game. But I've got a feeling, I haven't played them yet, I had to buy a PDF version of Dogfight because it's no longer available in hardback, and I'm going to send that off to Docs Direct to get it printed. I've got a feeling that is going to be the set of rules for me, because there are rules in it for using a lot more planes, flying in squadrons rather than just single planes, which is kind of what I want. I want lots of planes on the table, and I know from Lacquered Coffins that it's a good solo game as well. So I think that is the way I'm going to go, but I'll let you know how that goes in a future video. Anyway, been waffling on for a long time now about this set of rules. Didn't intend it to be too much of a criticism of these rules, because I think he's made a sort of good effort at it, but I don't think it's ever going to threaten Wings of Glory's standing, as the go-to aerial combat game for World War I for most people. Okay, thanks very much for watching. See you on the next video. Bye for now.